At 28 years old, I stood in my parents' driveway holding a court notice in one hand and my house keys in the other while my mother screamed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You owe this family everything," she shouted. The crazy part? For most of my life, I actually believed her. I believed I owed them for every meal, every school supply, every ride to work, every roof over my head. Because that's how my parents raised me, like love was a loan accumulating interest. And if you grew up in a house like mine, you understand exactly what that does to a kid. Nothing is ever freely given. Every favor becomes future leverage. Every kindness becomes emotional debt. And the moment you finally build something for yourself, they arrive with their hands out demanding repayment. But this story didn't begin in that driveway. It began 14 years earlier. Back when I was 14 years old, sitting on the floor of my bedroom, trying to fix a broken laptop with YouTube tutorials, because my parents had decided my older brother, Caleb, needed a new gaming PC more than I needed a computer for school. That was normal in our house. Caleb always came first. Always. He was 2 years older than me, charming when he wanted to be, effortlessly confident, and somehow permanently allergic to responsibility. Teachers called him full of potential. My parents called him misunderstood. Everyone else called him fun. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who stayed out of trouble, got good grades, and learned very early that being dependable meant people expected you to survive neglect silently. If Caleb forgot homework, my parents defended him. If I forgot homework, I got lectured about discipline. If Caleb crashed the family car, it was an accident. If I spilled juice on the carpet, I was careless and disrespectful. The rules shifted constantly depending on who made the mistake. And somehow, the answer always protected him. When I was 15, Caleb convinced my parents he wanted to become a music producer. For 6 months, our entire house revolved around that dream. Thousands of dollars in equipment, studio software, microphones, private classes, a custom desk for his creative space. I remember standing in the hallway watching my father carry expensive speakers into Caleb's room while I was still using textbooks held together with tape because my parents refused to buy replacements. "You don't need new ones," my mom had told me earlier that week. "They still work." The equipment for Caleb alone cost more than everything my parents had spent on me in 2 years. But any time I pointed out the favoritism, they acted offended. "Stop keeping score," my father would say. Funny how the people benefiting from unfairness always hate when someone notices the numbers. The music producer phase lasted exactly 4 months before Caleb got bored. Then came photography, then crypto trading, then fitness coaching, then a clothing brand. Every new identity came with more money from my parents and another speech about supporting his future. Meanwhile, at 16, I got my first real job washing dishes at a restaurant after school. Not because I wanted extra spending money, because I needed it. I paid for my own clothes, my own school supplies, my own phone bill, eventually even groceries sometimes. And the moment I started earning money, something changed in my parents. They started treating me less like a child and more like a resource. If the electricity bill was high, my mother hinted I should contribute. If Caleb needed gas money, my father suggested I help because family supports each other. If groceries were expensive, somehow my paycheck became part of the solution. I still remember the first time my mother directly asked me for money. I had just gotten paid after working an exhausting weekend shift. I was sitting at the kitchen table counting cash because I needed enough for a school trip fee due the next day. She walked in casually and said, "Your brother's going through a rough time. Can you lend him $200? Lend. That word almost made me laugh. Nobody in my family ever repaid anything, especially not Caleb. I told her I needed the money for school. She looked genuinely disappointed in me. Sometimes family matters more than school. Meanwhile, Caleb was upstairs ordering takeout and playing video games. That was the moment something quietly shifted inside me. I stopped expecting fairness. And honestly, that realization probably saved my life. Because once you stop expecting love from people incapable of giving it properly, you start planning escape instead. So I did. I worked constantly. Double shifts during holidays, construction jobs during summers, late-night warehouse work after graduation, anything that moved me 1 inch further away from dependence. While Caleb floated from dream to dream funded by my parents' endless optimism, I built myself brick by brick. Slowly, quietly, alone. At 21, I graduated college with honors and student loans small enough to actually manage because I'd worked nearly the entire time. My parents didn't attend graduation. Caleb had a very important networking event the same weekend involving a nightclub promoter he met online. My mother called afterward and asked if I could send pictures. I said sure. Then cried in my car afterward because some stupid part of me still wanted them to care. That's the hard thing about families like this. Even after years of disappointment, a piece of you keeps hoping the next achievement will finally make them see you. The next promotion, the next milestone, the next success. You keep thinking eventually they'll realize your value, but people who benefit from undervaluing you rarely change willingly. At 23, I landed a solid job in cybersecurity, not glamorous at first. Long hours, high stress, but stable. For the first time in my life, stability felt possible. I rented a tiny apartment with stained carpets and broken blinds, and loved every second of it because nobody screamed there. Nobody demanded money there. Nobody treated my existence like an inconvenience there. I slept peacefully for the first time in years. Meanwhile, Caleb was still living with my parents, still finding himself. Every few months he launched another career plan: day trading, podcasting, NFT consulting, fitness influencing. My parents funded all of it. Every failure somehow became proof he needed more support, never less. When I got promoted at 25, my salary nearly doubled. I didn't tell my family immediately because I already knew what would happen, but secrets don't stay hidden forever. My mother found out through my aunt, and suddenly I became very popular again. Calls started coming weekly. "How's work going? We miss you. You should visit more." At first, part of me felt happy. Pathetic, right? After years of emotional neglect, a few fake warm conversations almost fooled me. Then the requests started. First, it was small. Could I help Caleb with rent temporarily? Could I contribute toward his business idea? Could I co-sign a loan because my credit was better suited? Every request came wrapped in guilt. "Your brother just needs one real chance. He's struggling mentally. You've always been the strong one." Strong, that word exhausted me. In dysfunctional families, strong usually means, "We've decided your pain matters least." I refused politely every time, and every refusal made the atmosphere colder. By 27, I had saved enough for a down payment on a townhouse. Not huge, but beautiful, 3 floors. Small backyard, big kitchen, quiet neighborhood, mine, completely mine. I still remember getting the keys. My hands shook so badly the realtor laughed, not because I was nervous. Because after years of surviving emotionally exhausting people, ownership felt unreal. Like freedom had finally become physical. I made one stupid mistake. I invited my family over. The moment Caleb walked inside, I saw it happen. That look, envy mixed with calculation. My mother wandered slowly through each room commenting on prices. My father kept asking mortgage questions. Caleb leaned against the kitchen counter saying almost nothing. But his eyes never stopped moving, studying, measuring, claiming. Dinner started awkwardly, then my father cleared his throat. "You know," he said carefully, "this place has more than enough room for family." There it was, already. I stared at him. "What does that mean?" Caleb answered before he could. "It means maybe someone who actually needs help could benefit too." I laughed once because surely this couldn't already be happening. "We were thinking," my mother continued carefully, "that Caleb could stay here temporarily while he rebuilds financially." Temporarily. Another dangerous word in my family. Temporary support became permanent dependence incredibly fast. I said no immediately, politely, firmly. Silence hit the table instantly. My father's expression darkened. "You have 3 bedrooms, and your brother is struggling." "He's been struggling for 12 years, I replied before I could stop myself. Caleb slammed his fork down. "There you go again, acting superior because you got lucky." Lucky. That word nearly made me choke. Lucky. Like the years of double shifts never happened. Like the nights I skipped meals to save money never happened. Like the anxiety attacks during finals while balancing work never happened. People like Caleb always call discipline luck because admitting otherwise would force them to confront themselves. The dinner ended badly. My mother cried. My father called me selfish. Caleb muttered something about remembering this when things changed. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I would soon. Over the next month, pressure intensified, daily calls, guilt trips, family members contacting me. Apparently, my parents had started telling relatives I abandoned Caleb during a mental health crisis. Interesting how suddenly he was in crisis the moment I owned property. Then came the real shock. One evening I got home from work and found Caleb sitting on my porch. Not visiting, waiting. He stood up smiling strangely when he saw me. "You should really reconsider," he said casually. I unlocked the door but didn't invite him in. Reconsider what? Helping family before lawyers get involved. I froze. What lawyers? He smirked. Mom and Dad think you owe the family compensation after all the sacrifices they made supporting your education. I actually laughed. Supporting my education, I had paid nearly everything myself, but Caleb continued talking calmly like this was perfectly reasonable. They think it's unfair you got successful while I'm still stuck rebuilding. Rebuilding what? He'd never built anything to begin with. I told him to leave. Instead, he stepped closer. You know they could make life really difficult for you? That sentence changed everything, because suddenly this wasn't emotional manipulation anymore. It was a threat, and threats force clarity. The next week, I was officially served legal papers. My parents were attempting to claim financial entitlement tied to familial investment inequity and long-term emotional damages suffered by a dependent sibling. It sounded insane. Because it was insane, but lawsuits don't need truth to cause damage. They just need time and money and stress. The next year became war. My parents weaponized the family against me completely. Relatives stopped inviting me places. Family friends looked at me differently. Online posts painted me as some greedy monster who abandoned his struggling brother after becoming wealthy. Meanwhile, Caleb kept escalating. He started referring to my townhouse as the family property. I heard from a mutual friend that he'd already talked about redesigning the upstairs after moving in. That broke something inside me, not emotionally, strategically. Because finally I understood, they genuinely believed they were going to take my home, so I stopped trying to preserve peace. Instead, I started collecting evidence, every message, every voicemail, every threat. And the deeper I dug, the uglier the truth became. My parents weren't just trying to pressure me emotionally. They had actively discussed ways to force a settlement involving my property. Then came the mistake that destroyed them. An accidental email. Their lawyer mistakenly forwarded internal communications to mine. Inside was a message from my mother saying, "Once Caleb gets partial ownership, we can refinance or sell the property completely. This gives him the stability he deserves." There it was, not concern, not fairness, asset transfer, pure greed. My lawyer nearly smiled reading it, but I didn't feel happy, just tired. Because seeing your own parents reduce your life to an opportunity hurts differently. Still, I stayed patient, quiet, careful, and while they kept underestimating me, my own life kept improving. I earned another promotion, expanded my professional network, strengthened my finances, started therapy, started sleeping again, started realizing something important. Their chaos only controlled me when I participated in it. Meanwhile, Caleb spiraled. He bragged too openly, talked too confidently. A friend secretly recorded him at a bar laughing about how he'd finally hit the jackpot with his successful brother. In the recording, Caleb literally said, "Once I get the house, I'm selling it immediately and disappearing for a while." That audio became the nail in their coffin. At mediation, my lawyer played everything. The emails, the threats, the recordings, the realtor conversations. Every ugly little piece of truth they thought nobody would ever see. I'll never forget my mother's face during the audio clip, or my father staring at the table realizing they'd lost, or Caleb suddenly looking terrified for the first time in his life. Because manipulators are brave only when they think consequences don't exist. The case collapsed almost immediately. They withdrew everything, paid my legal fees, issued written apologies, and just like that, the family narrative shattered publicly. Relatives turned on them fast after seeing evidence. People who ignored me suddenly apologized, some genuinely, some selfishly. I didn't care anymore, because by then something inside me had finally healed, not completely, but enough. Enough to understand I was never hard to love. I was just surrounded by people who valued usefulness more than humanity. These days, life is quieter, peacefully quieter. I still live in the townhouse they tried to take. Sometimes I sit in the backyard late at night listening to nothing but wind moving through trees and think about how badly they underestimated me. They thought survival made me weak. What they never understood is that surviving them made me dangerous. Because when someone spends their whole life building themselves alone, they learn exactly how strong they really are. And every night before bed, I lock my front door, look around my home, and smile knowing one thing with absolute certainty. Nobody in my family will ever own a single piece of my future again.